I don't know about you, but that looked like money.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and happy football season 2025. Kicked off last night. I fell asleep because of the rain delays, and quite frankly, I don't like either team, so I didn't really care. But this video was going to be kind of fun. I should have put this together a couple weeks ago when fantasy football drafts were in full swing. You know, those are kind of winding down now. But I thought it'd be fun to create a fantasy football team using kind of overlooked, neglected, ostracized greats of the past in the vintage football card world. And that's what we're going to do. I kind of went through some stuff, putting some notes together on guys and on players, I should say. And what you're not going to see on this team I created, you're not going to see the stars, you know, the ones that get all the hobby love. You're not going to see Jim Brown or John Unitas or Sammy Baugh or Otto Graham, guys like that. This is a team that's going to be comprised of players that I think are overlooked. I don't want to get into undervalued and all that stuff. Value is what it is. I just think these players are overlooked, considering what they did for the game in their career. And most of the players I picked retired with significant, they held significant records when they retired. So that's why they were picked. A couple other ones were picked just because I wanted to pick them. So there's a little bit of bias there, but nonetheless, they're Hall of Famers, they're all-time greats, and I think that they are overlooked, underappreciated, whatever noun, adjective you want to use. I guess it's an adjective. Yeah. So anyway, let's get into this team. We're going to start with, let me pull up my handy dandy presentation. I'm naming my team the Hobby Rejects because that's what I think they are. I think they're rejected by the hobby for whatever reason. We are going to start with the defense / special teams because that's kind of what you draft for a fantasy football team, right? I've got the positions here: QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, special teams. We're not going to pick a team for this position, but I did pick, I think it was 4 players to put in here. And let's start with the first one. My first one is one of my favorites, Emlyn Tennell, 14-year career in the NFL. Pro Football Hall of Famer in 1967, the first African American to be selected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was an all-decade team member of the 50s. When they did their, the NFL did their all-time all-pro team back in 1969, he was one of the 16 players that was selected to that. In 1999, he was ranked number 70 by the Sporting News for the 100 greatest football players of all time. I didn't know that list existed until last night, but that was pretty cool. And in 2010, when they opened MetLife Stadium, he was one of the 22 New York Giants whose number was put into the Ring of Honor. So let's see. And in 2010, NFL Network ranked him number 79 out of 100 of the 100 greatest players of all time. I could go into a lot more, but we got a few more players to cover. But Emlyn Tennell is one of my defense / special team players that I selected. Next up, I went with Bobby Dillon. I've done videos on Bobby Dillon. I talk about Bobby Dillon a lot for what he accomplished in his career, playing with one eye. Can't be understated. When he retired, which was in, I think, 1958 or 59, he had the second most interceptions in league history behind the guy I just talked about, M. Tennell. He was a Pro Bowler every season from 55 to 58. and was an AP All-Pro from 54, 55, 57, and 58. Cool little nugget about Dylan. When he retired, he earned a bachelor's degree after he retired in accounting, and he worked for a company called Wilson Art, which manufactured decorative laminates. And he stayed there for 36 years, and he was eventually the president and CEO of the company. So, kind of a cool little nugget about him. Yeah, he did all that with one eye on the field, and quite a hell of a story for him. Next up, another guy that maybe he's not overlooked, but his cards sure are cheap, and that's Night Train Lane. He was a first or second team All NFL every year from 1954 to 1963. He was named to 7 Pro Bowls, and he intercepted 68 passes in his career. And he returned them, or 5 of them for touchdowns. He was a member of the 50th anniversary team, the 75th anniversary team, the 100th anniversary team, and the 1950s All-Decade team. I'm pretty sure he's the only guy who can claim that. I think he's the only player who's a member of all 4 of those teams. Quite a career for Night Train Lane. And last for my defensive players, we're going to go with Deacon Jones. Many consider Deacon Jones the guy who revolutionized the defensive end position in the NFL. And he actually came up with the phrase sacking the quarterback. I also picked him because I love the 63 Topps card, which is his rookie card. No, I'm kidding. I picked him because he was great. Sacks weren't a stat when he played, but Pro Football Weekly did a report on him and stated that he probably accumulated 173 and a half sacks during his career, and if that's true, that would put him 3rd on the all-time list, and it would have ranked him 1st all-time when he retired. They also noted that he had 22 sacks in 14 games in 1964, and that would have stood as a record until 1978, when a guy by the name of Al Baker would have broken it. So there is the defense special teams, and now we're going to move on to the glorious position of kicker. For my kicker position, I really wanted to throw you guys a curveball and pick George Blanda for this position. Instead, George Blanda is going to get an honorable mention. I do think he's kind of overlooked in the hobby, but that's a story for another video. My pick for kicker is Lou the Toe Groza. One reason is I love 1950 Bowman football. I think it's one of the top 5 most iconic vintage football sets ever made, and his rookie card happens to be in that set. I also picked him because not only was he a kicker, he was also an offensive lineman, and a really good one at that. Back when he played, well, at least for part of the time that he played, teams didn't have enough roster space to carry specialized players like a kicker. I believe back then, for the early part of his career, teams only had, I believe, 33 roster spots. So there was a lot of overlap, guys that play offense and defense, guys that play punter. I mean, look at George Blanda, not George Blanda, Sammy Baugh, kicker, defensive back, and a hell of a quarterback too. So yeah, I picked Lou Groza. When he retired, he was the last remaining member of the 46 Browns team. He played 21 seasons, which at the time when he retired, that was the most ever. Looking at my notes, he was a first or second team All-League 8 times. In 1954, he was the Sporting News NFL Player of the Year. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler. Of those 9, He was an offensive tackle in 6 of those Pro Bowls. That just goes to show how good he was as an offensive tackle. Let's see what else I got on him. In 21 years, he tallied 1,608 points, and that was the record at the time of his retirement. George Blanda later broke that. And after Blanda, I believe it was Gary Anderson who broke Blanda's record. But when Lou Groza retired, he was the all-time leader in points scored in the NFL. Moving on to the tight end position, most fantasy rosters, nobody carries a second tight end, just like they don't carry a second kicker. That's why there was only one kicker. So for this team, I will have one tight end. And as much as I wanted to pick John Mackey because he was great and all that stuff, one guy who's extremely overlooked by just about everybody, and some people don't even know who he is. My pick for tight end is Jackie Smith. When he retired, well, he played 16 years. After he retired, at the time of his retirement, he held the record for the most career receiving yards by a tight end at just a little over 7,900. He had the highest yards per reception at 16.5. And I just don't think enough people know how good Jackie Smith was. In this day and age, the tight ends used a lot more. And back in his time, he was overshadowed by, like Mike Ditka, John Mackey, etc. Jackie Smith, though, he was the real deal. And, 7,900 yards receiving by a tight end in that era is very impressive. So Jackie Smith is my pick for the all-reject team at tight end. Next up, we have my picks for wide receiver. There are a few players I left off this list that I didn't want to, but I tried to stick with players who retired holding significant records. So as much as I wanted Del Schaffner on this list and a couple of other guys, I stuck with using that formula. Otherwise, I'd have 8 wide receivers on this list at least. At the end of the day, I wound up with 4, and the first one's going to be kind of, I don't want to say controversial, but I don't think he's really overlooked. He doesn't have any cards except for one. He's got a Wheaties item too, back in 1934, I think it is. But let's get to it. My first pick is Don Hutson. The reason I went with Hutson is when he played, the wide receiver wasn't used very much. When he retired, he had the NFL record for most yards by a wide receiver at 7,991. But more impressive is that he had 99 touchdowns. And that record wasn't broken until the 1980s by Steve Largent. 99 touchdowns when he retired in 1945. That's why he's on my list, because that blew my mind. That's just an incredible number for that era. He only has, his, quote unquote mainstream card is the 55 Tops All-American, which was shown here. He's also got a 1934 Wheaties, very hard to locate, very expensive, very, very awesome. But his 55 All-American is widely considered his rookie card. It came out, 10 years after he retired, so it's not a playing days item, but it is a highly desired card, and it's a short print from one of the greatest sets of the 50s. So Don Hutson is my number 1. Following Don Hutson is Raymond Berry. When he retired, he had the record for yardage at 9,275. He set that in 1967. Quick side note, you're not going to see Lance Allworth here. That he's a no-brainer. He's not overlooked in the hobby. Raymond Berry, I think, is. You can pick up a really nice PSA 4 rookie card from 57 Tops for about $120. That's crazy. So yeah, Raymond Berry's up there. I think he's again overlooked because of Lance Allworth. Honestly, Allworth was the Jerry Rice of his time. There's no question about it. So just like in the '80s, Jerry Rice, but there was James Lofton, Steve Largent. I'm missing some. I mean, Art Monk. Guys like that get overlooked, and they were great players. Allworth did the same to a lot of wide receivers back in the '60s. Speaking of, another guy who's overlooked and probably made Joe Namath a Hall of Famer is Don Maynard. When he retired in 1973, he had the all-time yardage record for wide receivers at 11,834. Doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time, that was a lot. Different era, different game, different rules, all that stuff. Lastly, this is more of a personal choice because I think he's probably the most overlooked, underrated, under-heralded, maybe player in the Hall of Fame. Definitely wide receiver, and that's Paul Warfield. He still holds the record for yards per reception in a career at 20.1. That's the highest for any player with more than 300 catches. And without him, my Dolphins probably don't win their 2 titles in the 70s. They definitely would have been a struggle. Warfield changed that team. His style of play, was kind of the blueprint for what wide receivers were to become. His speed and athleticism were second to none. So yeah, Paul Warfield, crazy underrated, probably undervalued too, but what is value? Supply and demand. Not a lot of demand for Paul Warfield apparently, but to me, the most, I'll say it, probably the most underrated Hall of Famer there is. Next up are the running backs, and I only have 2. It's not because running backs of the 50s sucked or anything. It's because I wanted to stick to players who, when they retired, they had significant records that they held. So, as much as it pained me, I don't have Marion Motley on this list, and I don't have Lenny Moore on this list, or on this team. 2 of my favorites of all time, but they didn't fit the criteria that I was, basing this off of. So my first running back is Steve Van Buren. One of the first big stars of the 40s. He had a pretty short career. When he retired, he had the record for rushing yards at 5,860. Again, doesn't sound like a lot. Was at the time. And he also held the record for rushing touchdowns at 69. He was also a kickoff return specialist. Again, small rosters back then, so players did double duty, triple duty. He had 3 straight rushing titles, a total of 4, but he had 3 straight from 1947 and 1949. In 1947, his 1,008 rushing yards broke the single season record of 1,004, held by Beatty Feathers. Beatty Feathers has a 1935 Schickel, which is a really good card. Anyway, injuries did wreck his career. He retired in 51. I think he only played 7 seasons, something like that. So yeah, Steve Van Buren is my first pick. My second pick is Joe the Jet Perry. When he retired in 1963, he held the rushing yard record for a career with 9,723. And he also had 71 touchdowns, which was also the record at the time. He was the first African American MVP in 1954, and he was the first player in NFL history to rush for 1,000 yards in consecutive seasons. He did that in 1953 and 1954. So, kind of a cool little note about him there. So, yeah, those are my running backs. And now we're going to move on to the quarterback position. And I did omit some people from my team. So, here are your team hobby reject quarterbacks that I picked. You'll notice there's some omissions. There's no Sonny Jurgensen. There's no George Blanda. Yeah, no Len Dawson. But my first QB, there is this guy, and it should come as no surprise to you if you've watched me for very long. It is Bobby Lane. I believe Bobby Lane is one of the most overlooked quarterbacks of his era. I think he's overshadowed by Sammy Baugh. I think he's overshadowed by Otto Graham, as well as John Unitas and Bart Starr. But when Lane retired in 1962, he had the record for most passing yards, 26,768, and most passing touchdowns at 196. He won back-to-back titles with the Lions in 52 and 53. And when he retired, he also had records for passing attempts, completions, as well as a touchdown record and the yardage record. One thing I didn't know, he was one of the last players to not wear a face mask. And some people also credit him with creating the 2-minute drill. Don't know if that's true, but there are some sources out there who say that he did. So yeah, Bobby Lane is my first one. My second one is my guy Y.A. Tittle. This is a little bit of a biased choice, but it's also a legitimate choice. Now, his 1950 Bowman rookie card, I wouldn't say is overlooked or underappreciated or anything like that, but I do think Y.A. Tittle, the player, is. The guy was the guy during the 50s. You know, he had all the passing records. He won MVPs. The one thing he didn't win was a Super Bowl, and I don't know. There's 11 guys on offense. You know, it's not the quarterback who wins a Super Bowl on his own. Football is like the only sport where a player can carry his team to a title is probably basketball. There's no other major sport that lays claim to that, and football is no different. I'm going off on a tangent here, but let's get back to Y.A. Tittle. Yes, he never won a Super Bowl title, or not a Super Bowl, a championship. He did make 7 Pro Bowls. He was a 4-time first-team All-Pro, and he was named the MVP 4 times. By the UPI, he was named it twice. By the NEA, he was named it twice, and by the AP, he was named it once. At the time of his retirement, Tittle held the following records. This is crazy. He had the passing yard record, the touchdown record, pass attempts, completions, passing touchdowns in a season, 36. That was a lot back then. Passing touchdowns in a game, he had 7, tied with a few others. Career total offensive yards at just under 30,000, and games played at 176. Tittle does not get enough recognition. It's probably because he never won a championship. I think that's stupid. You know, he played in New York. You know, at the time, you know, now that I think about it, you know, at the time the Yankees were winning titles and the Giants were losing titles. Like they would make the championship game and lose. So there's probably something to be said to that as well. You know, maybe that's why Frank Gifford isn't Gifford is kind of popular. But anyway, we're talking about quarterbacks. My third QB is definitely overlooked. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s like I did, Marino was chasing the big passing records, and I think a lot of people assumed that it was John Unitas that held all the records. It wasn't. It was this guy, Fran Tarkenton, the scrambler. Um, Tarkenton retired after the 78 season. He held every record when he retired: attempts, completions, yards, touchdown passes. And he could scramble, he could run. He'd be a great fantasy quarterback, honestly. Um, his former coach, Norm Van Brocklin, hated that, which is why he traded him. But, with as prolific as passing has gotten over the last 15 years or so, 20 years, whatever it is, every record he held when he retired, it's still in the top 20 of all time, every one of them. So, one other weird record that he held is he ran. Let me see that. Yeah, he ran for at least one touchdown in 15 straight seasons. That's another record. So, yeah, and he ranked sixth in career rushing yards for a QB, which, seeing the running QBs we've had in the last decade, that's pretty impressive. So, yeah, Fran Tarkington is the third QB on my vintage football card all reject fantasy team, and I like it. So there you have it. That's my all reject fantasy team. I thought it would be kind of fun to. I like to talk about players who I think are overlooked, forgotten, that sort of thing, and I thought putting it in a fantasy football type of format might be kind of fun. Wasn't as fun as I thought it would be, but I don't know. I tried to put something together for people to, you know, everybody knows Jim Brown and John Unitas and players like that. A lot of you probably don't know who Lou Groza is, and I wanted to kind of bring that to the forefront, players like that. So, yeah, that's all I've got for now. Football starts tomorrow, for real, even though there's a game Thursday and Friday. Red Zone is no longer commercial free, unfortunately, so we don't get 7 hours of commercial free football. Such a non-brand thing for Disney to do. But anyway, hope you all enjoy the first week of football, and we'll talk soon. See ya.